In part 3 of my build videos, I showed this skirt piece. I showed it actually flipped the other way around. This is the back side that the, the body comes up from here. The first layer or ring of the body is glued to the holes here. Bolts come up through it, and then the first ring gets bolted, second ring gets glued to the first ring, third ring gets glued to the second ring. So in video 3, this piece was misaligned. For some weird reason, it was wider than the piece next to it. I think this is C, this is B, and I think this is A. No, I got it wrong. I've actually written it on there. So we've got A, B, C, D. So B was the one that did not print right. It was too wide on this side, and then it was also too short right in here. All three pieces would line up really good, but this fourth one, there was a gap here. So what I did at first, I took the piece and I dremeled a bunch off of here, and I dremeled a bunch off of here, and I was able to get the ring to go together to the point where I could glue it, but obviously it was kind of scrunched on these two corners to get it to glue. It wasn't perfectly flush. I put the body ring pieces on it, and these holes didn't quite line up. Just a little bit off. Probably would have worked fine, maybe even if I had just enlarged the holes in the body where it attaches. And I asked on the Facebook group for the Michael Badley R2-D2 plans, and they suggested, the comment I got suggested, just go ahead and glue it together and nobody's even going to see it. It's the skirt. Nobody but me will know that it wasn't lined up properly. So I just kind of put the pieces away and I worked on body ring 1 and 2 and didn't really think much about it until I started putting body ring 1 together, and then I put body ring 2 together. I'll show that in a bit. And they fit nicely together, which made me wonder why this skirt wasn't lining up, why that one piece was actually, the dimensions were wrong. So I brought the piece into 2 different slicer programs, and it came out with the same dimensions. And my question on the forums was, did anybody else have this issue? Is there something weird with this part, with the file? And no, there isn't. So eventually I decided to reprint it. Now, it's a 20-hour print at 0.2 resolution, 25% infill, 4 perimeters. But I decided to do it partially because I could then use this one as a test for sanding and priming before I start doing that on real pieces, which you can kind of see the results of here. That rib on the left I sanded. I have a Dremel, I think it's an E6000. It's like a 15-year-old hand sanding tool, kind of vibratory forward and back with a triangular head on it, and you can put rubber pieces in it that have sandpaper that wrap around it to do curves and things like that. So I just kind of stuck the sander in there as much as I could get into these 2 openings and those first 2, up and down those first 2 ribs, and it did remove a fair amount of material. The only time it really started melting any material at all is when I tried to do the sides of the ribs. It just started to do a little bit of melting, but you can see after one coat of filler primer, it's not bad compared to this side that I didn't do any sanding or any prep work to. This just has the primer, and even up top also. I did that area a little bit, trying to move it around so the shadows, maybe you can see the layer lines, but quite considerable difference in layer lines from there to there, especially in that upper section, upper third of the piece. So I might end up doing that instead of hand sanding it all. I tend to hand sand more than use power tools on small projects, but as I haven't really sanded 3D prints before, I might do that if it's going to save me some time. So, got sidetracked. Back to this. So, 20-hour print. I didn't have any more of the purple. I had some black. It's the same Xyltech as the purple. And after the 20-hour print, I was very happy to find that it lines up perfectly. So no gap whatsoever, whereas the other one had gaps on either end. And basically, I had to put the piece in kind of at an angle, over exaggerated, but that's what I had to do to get it to fit. So I sanded a bunch away kind of at an angle on both ends, so it would sit in an angle which would allow it to touch and be glued the adjacent pieces. But now after the reprint, it's great. So I don't know what the problem was. I did re-slice this in the Prusa slicer and then reprint it, and I looked at the G-code file from the first one and the second one. And the second one, the file was a few bytes larger, just slightly larger. And I went through it, and I'm kind of looking. There's stuff at the beginning and end of the G-code file about the type of printer and the print bed size and the temperatures and all that kind of stuff. And those all look the same. The beginning of the G-code, the actual movement of the hot end looked the same. The end of the G-code did look a bit different. So if there was anything different, it was in the end, and it wasn't that much. So I'm leaning more towards it was a printer, some kind of a printer issue. Now, what kind of a printer issue makes something print too wide in one direction and too short in another? I have no idea. But luckily, knock on MDF, luckily it hasn't happened with any of the other parts that I've printed. Like I said, I have printed the first and second rings now are complete of the body, and they seem to line up okay. Now I'll show that again. I'll show that later, so I should probably just shut up and show it. But so far, this looks like a one-off anomaly. So my fingers are crossed that it doesn't happen again. Ring 3 is the next thing that I need to print, and I think the longest print time on that is about 24 hours for a couple of the pieces, whereas ring 2, there was a piece that was about 46 hours and another one that was over 40 hours. So those are the two longest print times for the body. Now the legs are another story. I haven't even loaded those files or looked into them because I kind of wanted to do the body first. So I've got doors left to do from the body files. I haven't printed any of the hinges. I haven't printed any of the utility arms that come out from the sides of R2. I did do the front 2 arms, although I haven't glued anything together yet. And those are small enough pieces that I really don't care. What I'm really worried about are the ones that take multiple days. 24 hours or more, that use a lot of plastic and take a lot of time to print and you can't sit there and watch them the whole time. And then PETG filament. There's some parts that you're recommended to print in PETG. And I'm having problems with PETG, which I can also go into later. But for right now, yeah, success. Very happy that the skirt is lined up great. So now my issue is gluing and finishing. Do I glue? I'm thinking of gluing these two halves together that I already have shown here. Either that or gluing the other two. These are the easiest to glue because they have that cutout shape. So one of these pieces has the cutout in this direction, the other one has the cutout in the other direction, and then they've got that strut right in the middle. So you can see there, the seam goes right down the middle. So putting glue in there, clamping it, it's pretty much locked in position. Can't move around that much. Whereas these don't have anything locking them in position. So pretty much have to clamp, I'm not even sure. Clamp right there. We'll kind of keep them lined up in that direction. But I don't know, I don't have any clamps large enough to go across this way. And even if I did, I don't know if there's enough room to get a clamp in there without it pulling the two pieces together over here. Because ideally you would want it perfectly lined up across here. And I don't have a clamp that can do that. There just really isn't that much room. So I might end up having to buy some new clamps. Or just, like I said, one across there. There's also this rib. I can probably might be able to take one of these and do it across there. One-handed with a camera is probably not going to happen, but yeah, so that might be an issue, figuring out how to clamp those two together. But anyway, important thing is this part is dimensionally correct now. So that was video 3 where I had that issue, and yeah, issue is now corrected. Okay, so here we go with rings 1 and 2 of the body. Have been printed. Ironic, standing next to a water heater with a drainage flow pipe, and I've got R2 body with the threaded rods that hold them together. Okay, again, this is the Michael Baddeley Mark III R2D2, the cut files. So the Mark III R2D2 is made to be printed in 3 rings for the body, and the dome 1 piece. So how do you do that? Well, basically you get Creality S5, and that printer is 500 millimeters by 500 millimeter print area, and it can do the entire first ring of the body as 1 piece, the second ring of the body as another piece, the third ring is another piece, and then, as I said, the entire dome as 1 print. Now those are extremely long prints and use a lot of filament, and obviously the printer is huge. So somebody in the community actually came up with the idea to cut the Mark III body into pieces. Now, it was originally designed by Mr. Badley to be printed in 3 different rings, and then the rings held together with these threaded rods, and then the final ring, there'll be a nut on the top of that one, and then the bottom of this ring there'll be a nut, and they will compress the rings together so you don't even really, I think he says you don't have to glue it if you print it that way, if you don't want to, that the rods will have enough tension to hold the whole thing together. I would think that would be kind of a ridiculous thing to do, but anyway, the cut version, so it's basically taking something that was not designed to be printed in pieces and breaking it into pieces to be printed on printers of 300 millimeters print bed size or larger. So one of my printers is 300 by 300, and that's the one that I'm doing to print all of the body ring parts. So I know that there's going to be gaps in this video, but that's because it's just kind of precariously balancing on a piece of wood and it's not glued together. But all of the, oh, and I also haven't like trimmed up the bottom of ring 2. I made sure that the posts that are in the bottom of ring 1 fit into the top of ring 1, fit into the bottom of ring 2. And then earlier when I was working on it, I actually took like a cargo strap and wrapped it around the entire body and cinched it fairly tight. And it did get all of the seams nice and tight together and looked great. So these are basically just due to gravity kind of pulling outwards, and that's why things aren't really lining up. But they do line up really nice. And earlier, as I was talking about with the skirt, where I had a piece that printed in the wrong dimensions, these all seem to be fine. Okay, this one is a bit high, but I can see it's not quite on the posts. That's why that one's a bit high. It actually is flush. And then this back piece, that one is just got some pins in row 1 of the body that go into holes into the back piece, and then it just leans up against the side, which I guess technically is what the same thing these things do too, but it's just that, yeah, that one's a bit, lines up fine again when it's all tightened, but it's making me nervous how I'm supposed to glue it together, whether I should use one of those clamps or come up with something else. This right here, if you're wondering why there's blue tape there, I got excited and I had this together without the threaded rods and brought it into the living room to show my wife, and of course everything fell on the floor, and this is really thin right here, and it broke a piece of the PLA off because PLA is brittle. So yeah, if you can print it in PETG, I would recommend PETG or PLA Plus. The legs I will be printing in PLA Plus. I have decided that. Just to make it a bit stronger and a little bit less brittle, which I'm pretty sure PLA Plus is. I've used PLA Plus before, but it was a long time ago. I still have just a tiny bit of PLA Plus white filament that's got to be 3 years old. So this piece I printed on the Prusa Mark III, and again, both my printers, the dimensions are really good as far as parts fitting together. And the multicolor down there I've gone over before, that I used white, purple, and orange filament because printing the pieces you end up with leftover bits on spools, and so I combined all those into one. I'm using Printed Solid brand PLA for ring 2 and 3. I ordered 5 spools of that. I have gone through just over 2 spools to print ring 2. 2 spools and then just a little bit. So I've got 2 full spools and like 90% of another spool to print the third ring, which I don't think uses as much plastic as the second one, so I don't think I'm even going to use all of those up, which is fine. I'll have some extra regular white PLA to do some of the other parts in, but I will be ordering some PLA Plus, as I said, to do the legs in. Now, the lighting in here isn't that great, but I think you can see down here. Yeah, okay. Down here you can see some of the work I did yesterday with 2-part Bondo body filler. Ring 1, I was using a really thin sheet of paper to level my bed. So it was getting some elephant foot, which is when you 3D print. Say my fingers are the layers, and if you have it close to the bed, that first layer tends to get squished, and so kind of like an elephant's foot, it's squished outwards. So the bottom of all of the rings, or for pieces for the rings, one had a little bit, filament was bulging a little bit out, and then oddly, I think because if you look, it prints this big flat part that goes all the way in, and then it starts doing the thin vertical walls. It also went a little bit of a bump out where it transitioned from printing this part to the vertical walls. So hopefully it shows up on camera. What I basically did was I put Bondo, well, first I filed down the bump that was here for the transition from the thinner vertical walls from the base part, and sanded the elephant's foot level with it. And then I noticed that there was an indentation, so it wasn't just a bump, 2 bumps that needed to be sanded down and then this would be flush with the wall. It turned out that this kind of goes inward and then up. So I don't know, kind of a little bit of kind of like that, if that makes sense. So filled Bondo into this area and then sanded with 150 grit paper until this was flush. So now this is flush with the vertical wall. So it just filled in an area, basically like I don't even know if that's 2 millimeters, maybe 2 millimeters from the bottom. So 2 millimeters of plastic, and then here down there's about 2 millimeters of plastic, and then the middle is got some Bondo just to level it out so it didn't have a kind of a dished appearance there. And then while I was there, I also, with the 150 grit, just kind of did some sanding on these vertical pieces. I can feel over here, which there's no way this camera's gonna, phone is gonna pick up, but there's an area here that kind of bulges out. That's gonna need to be leveled. And I haven't sanded any of this stuff. You can probably hear that, my fingernail going over it. Those are the layer lines. Now I printed it in 0.2 resolution, which is why, see this piece here, this was the 46-hour piece. It goes from here, over here, and up to here. So that was 46 hours, the longest print so far. And doing it in 0.2 layer height, it takes so many layers to build it up. That's pretty much why it took so long to print that. The advantage with 0.2 layer lines that I learned in a YouTube video by Michael Badley that was filmed during an R2D2 Builders Club in the UK meeting was that with the finer resolution, the layers are pretty much squished together more, so it adds to the strength. So that was another reason why I did it, apart from thinking that it would be less work to sand it, because there'd be thinner layer lines which should fill in with filler primer, sandable primer spray, or glazing putty, whereas they might have to have more work to sand them if I printed at a 0.3 resolution. So it adds to the strength, and hopefully it reduces some of the finishing time, which is pretty much where I'm at now, the finishing. I have not done any sanding and painting of 3D parts. I've done a little bit of painting, just taken a part off and added acrylic paint to it, but never anything on this scale. So I'll have to reread the forums, because I think they primer first. When I was showing pieces of the skirt, I've got that one where I tested the primer. I think they prime it first, and then they do some sanding, and then they do some glazing putty to fill in imperfections, and then prime again, which seems to me, why not just put the glazing putty on before the first primer coat? Because, like I said, I've already lightly sanded this plastic, and I can feel areas that I know are going to need some glazing putty, so why not put that on before spraying it with your first coat of primer? I don't know. I'll look into that more. But that's my next thing on my list to do is hours and hours of sanding and priming and using glazing putty or Bondo if there's big enough problems with the printed parts, as well as getting the third row of the body printed. I'm actually starting it today. The first row has 4 pieces, which you can see there, like the skirt. It has 4 pieces, and the bolt holes line up with the skirt. And the skirt is, you don't even have to glue the skirt to this, because you bolt through it, and then there's a big plate that you print that covers up that square hole, and that's what the center foot mounts to. So 4 pieces for ring 1, 5 pieces here for ring 2. There's 2 shoulders, 2 pieces that each have half the shoulder, and then there's that back piece for piece number 5. And then the top has 6 pieces. 2 of them only take 8 hours each to print, so I'm printing one of those now. And then 2 of them take about 24 hours. And then there's another back panel piece, which I actually can't remember how long that's going to take, but it's very similar to this back panel, where it's just pretty much a featureless back panel, although there's a ridge up at the top with a hole that I'm actually not even at this point sure what goes through that hole. And then the longer piece that's still, I think, only 24 hours is the one that goes here in the front. And that's the iconic part of R2-D2, kind of like the vent. Above the vent is where the 2 arms come out, one that opens from the left and one that opens from the right. So that piece is the most complicated one of the body, with this one being a second, because when this prints, it has built-in supports for these slots. The what they call the coin slots is a piece that sticks out that you bolt in from behind. So you have to pull out after you print it the support material that is built into the model. You don't have to add it, it's built into the model to get those rectangles open. Well, the whole area where the arms in the front of R2-D2 are, those whole things are filled with the same type thing, a pre-generated, pre-built support, and you have to manage to pull those out of there after you print that big part. So yeah, I'm very pleased that I'm making progress, but now it's just getting into that confusion where I'm like, what do I do? Do I paint, prime, sand? Which order do I go in? And get the process down and all that. It is September. It's the beginning of September now. So at some point I'm going to lose the ability to paint for the year or for the season. So it'll turn to fall. Be too cold to paint. So at that point I'll just be probably printing the legs is what I'll be doing at that point. And I could do sanding, but not much primering. And glazing putty maybe. I could probably put it on and then keep the parts in the garage so it's not a heated garage, but it's probably warm enough for glazing putty to cure. But that's getting ahead of myself. So yeah, that's where I'm at with the body. So it's 2 pieces of good news. The skirt is done and lines up properly, and body rings 1 and 2 are done and line up properly. When I say that, this is 90% lined up properly. There is a small gap on one side. Right now, these pieces, ring 1 actually has plastic pins that go in and hold the pieces together, and I don't have those in right now. So it's just sitting on this block, kind of just held by the metal bars. But yeah, it's 99% there. It should be fine. I should be able to glue it and it will be fine. And as I said, I've already clamped a ring around the strap around the body, and those seams are okay. So enough babbling for today. That's where I'm at on the body.